I'm Samantha Brentmore, and welcome to the Rosemoor Roundtable, a limited discussion series hosted by myself and Rose Dioro, covering a range of topics specific to the romance audiobook industry. This third roundtable discussion is part one of a conversation around marketing practices for audiobooks. And this episode takes a specific look at grassroots marketing and the power of social media. Today, we welcome two guests, each with a unique perspective on the topic. The Rosemoor Roundtable is recorded over a live stream and produced and distributed by Brickshop Audio in podcast format. And now, here's your moderator for today, Rose.
Thank you so much, Samantha. Hi, everybody. As Samantha said, this is part one of a marketing conversation. There's so much to explore on this topic. And so today we're focusing our conversation around what applies to our amazing guests that we have. And I'm going to turn it over to them to introduce themselves. And Alexandria, why don't you go first?
Sure. Hi, I'm Alexandria Bellafleur. I'm an author of queer contemporary romance. My debut, Written in the Stars, came out in 2020. In that interconnected world, Hang the Moon and Count Your Lucky Stars followed. And my most recent release, The Fiancé Farce, A Sapphic Marriage of Convenience, came out this past April. My books have all been with HarperCollins, Avon so far. And I'm just, plugging along.
Awesome. So glad you're here.
Hi, my name is Jessica D. Wolf. I am a YouTuber, actually. So I have a YouTube channel called Peace Love Books XO, and I also have an Instagram. But I also recently started in the end of March a PR company dedicated to audiobooks called Forever and Always PR. And we help authors market their audiobooks, get new readers, and celebrate the new releases.
We are so glad you're both here. And, in this digital world that we're in. I mean, obviously audiobooks are a digital platform, but more and more, the way we learn about audiobooks, the way we learn about books in general is very digital, living in the social media space, a lot of grassroots efforts in terms of marketing. And so we're really excited to hear from both of you how that plays out in your lives as an author, as a booktuber. So we're going to dive in. I've got some questions for you, but feel free to kind of talk about things that feel relevant to our conversation here as well. So Jessica, I'm curious, when you first entered Romancelandia, what the social media landscape looked like at that time. We kind of all have a sense of what it looks like now, but I imagine there's been a bit, you've been around for a while. I imagine there's been quite a shift. I'd love to hear about that.
So I actually started blogging in 2011. So I had just graduated high school and I was kind of having an existential crisis, like, what am I doing with my life? So I started a blog. And from what I don't even think I had an Instagram in 2011. I don't remember when Instagram really became a thing. I remember posting in college, but that was like personal stuff. So blogs were huge. Blogging was super big in 2011, like the early 2010s. And that was when romance was really booming in the new adult industry. I mean, that's when Colleen Hoover was writing and Samantha Young and all these new adult romances. And I think I was only posting to my blog. There wasn't a lot of like cross posting, having to post all these different kind of social media platforms. And then I started YouTube when a lot was shifting towards YouTube in 2015. And I mean, even today we see blogging is not near what it used to be in the 2010s. And so a lot of that was primarily just the blogs. I don't remember Instagram being that big of a deal. I shifted over to Instagram when I shifted over to YouTube in 2015 and was posting content on both. But really, you focused on your main platform that wasn't really, I would call social media. It was where you were posting your reviews. So that's really what it was back when I joined.
And can you say a bit more about what sort of drew you into just getting involved at all? I guess first as a blogger, like obviously you could just be reading and listening and on your own. I imagine you were drawn to the community in some way. And can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So I think I discovered blogging through Goodreads. I had found a way that I wanted to track my reading. I have always been a reader. I was reading a lot. And so I found Goodreads and made a profile. And I'm pretty sure I found people who had blogs through Goodreads. And I've always loved writing. I did a lot of writing in high school, and I wanted to just continue as a creative outlet, I guess, and that sense of community sharing with a ton of people. So what was cool about blogging was that there were a lot of like weekly link things that you would do. So there was like in my mailbox Saturday where everybody would post all the books they got that week, and they would post it on a Saturday, and then someone who would host it and have like all these links, and you could add your own link and go visit everybody else. It was a really great way to connect with other people, find new blogs, and comment on other people. So it was definitely that sense of community. And I just wanted to like share what I was reading because there weren't too many people in my real life. And I feel like that's why a lot of people start their social media is they want to share their passion for books, but like in real life, they may have one or two friends and they might not read the same genre they do. And I had always been passionate about romance. So I really wanted that outlet, I guess, and place to find other people who were enjoying what I enjoyed.
Yeah, that makes sense. And now you've transitioned to, or not transitioned, but you've added in this sort of PR element to what you were doing was certainly marketing in its own right, but more from a personal perspective. And can you say more about sort of what that transition has looked like for you, what the impetus was for that, and sort of where you see what role the digital space, the social media space plays in this marketing landscape?
So I have been a teacher for 8 years and I wanted to quit my job. And so I was thinking about what I could do that I was really passionate about. And I've always loved reading. And my friend and I, Tori, who I run Forever and Always with, we were like, we both love audiobooks. And we didn't see a lot of indie authors, because I read a lot of indie romances mostly. And we didn't see a lot of them sharing a lot about their audio releases. There's always huge about release day. And then like 2 months later, they'd be like, oh, look, audio's out. And we're like, we didn't know this. We just saw a post on Instagram and that was it. And we thought it'd be really cool to offer readers the chance to review advanced listener copies, because I know a lot of friends who primarily read audio and they wait 2-3 months after the hype's died down to finally get to a book they've been wanting. So we really wanted to help authors promote their audiobooks because we saw there was definitely a lack of that in the community. And we have been so passionate about it that we wanted to give people also the chance to review audiobooks. And audiobooks have blown up a lot. So we were really excited to get into that kind of corner of the romance book world and help the authors that we love.
Makes complete sense to me. And we'll get in a little bit into more detail about sort of what it means, this boom in the audiobook world in a little bit. But this seems like a great moment to transition to talking to Alexandria about your entry into this world of romance. It seems like your background is mostly working with an established publisher, as you said, which I have so many questions about that in terms of marketing and your involvement in or not in the marketing of your books. But I know that you have a pretty active presence in social media on your own. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what is your relationship to the marketing of your books?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's definitely a partnership. I feel like my publisher has the reach and they have the money, they have the backing, they can definitely broaden a readership, but they don't necessarily have that close personal relationship with the readers. And so I feel like my primary role is to kind of bridge that gap. I try to establish that close personal relationship. The readers are reading my books, they're reading my words. I like connecting with them one-on-one. I try to be active on social media. Instagram is my primary platform. I'm on Twitter, but I'm not really sure if that's a dying platform or not. I feel like every week it changes. So I try to stay active and bridge that gap between what my publisher can do and what I can do. And I feel like, establishing that relationship is my best bet.
And was that led by you? I mean, did your publisher say to you, like, we'd really love for you to have a social media presence, or was that always something that was on your radar?
It was always on my radar. I started my author Instagram. Well, I transitioned my personal Instagram into my author Instagram before I was even published, when I was querying agents before I ever signed a book deal,
Mhm.
my publisher has made it very clear that they want us to have a platform, but not to extend ourselves, not to do something that doesn't make us, feel fulfilled. If you have a platform that doesn't make you happy, like I can't do TikTok. I can't do it. For some reason, I can't seem to bridge that gap for myself. So they don't, stress that I should. They just want us to be out there somewhere. And so I do what makes me and my readers happy by mostly being on Instagram.
Yeah, I don't do TikTok either. I totally get that. Did you always have your site set on being traditionally published? I mean, thinking of this like through the lens of marketing, obviously, as you said, the publisher has a larger reach perhaps than you would have had, at least in your entry into the industry. Was that something that you were always, I guess I'm curious how you decided to go down that path versus indie publishing, because especially in romance, obviously, the indie publishing is a really big part of this industry. Can you tell us a little bit about that choice?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I rely on praise. And so a lot of it was, thinking like setting my sights on a publisher. If someone can say, like, oh, you're worthy of being published, your words are great. That's what it
Uh-huh.
started with, to be
Uh-huh.
perfectly frank. I definitely would consider hybrid publishing these days. I mean, a lot of what I read is indie. It's,
Mhm.
it's indie, it's hybrid, it's trad pub. But when I started writing shortly after I graduated from college,
Mm.
the summer after I graduated. And so that was definitely something I thought, if I'm going to make this a career, which was my goal, I set my sights on trad pub. But I think, as your career progresses, your goals progress. And so maybe I
Mm.
don't feel like I, need that praise anymore. But the backing is really nice. And I've had a lot of support from my publisher that I
Mhm.
really appreciate.
That's great. I mean, it seems like it's been a good fit. I see your books everywhere. So,
So that's always good to hear.
yeah. Um, so, Jessica, from a PR perspective, do you I assume you're working with indie authors, or do you work with trad published authors too?
Just indie authors.
Okay. And can you talk to us a little bit about some of the tactics and strategies you use to market audiobooks, and also just thinking about your background in the social media world, sort of how that has played into some of the services that you do offer. And I guess what I'm after is kind of like what sort of data have you collected, in your time in this industry, in this digital world, about like what people pay attention to in the the social media marketing landscape?
So we have been helping authors since April. So we have been full time for like 2 months helping out romance authors. And so
Mhm.
we don't have any like actual concrete data from them about
Sure.
how their audiobooks have done. But we definitely, when we are showing what like our reviewers, so we run ARC tours for the authors. So we will open up signups and then we'll vet the reviewers and give the author the amount of reviewers that they want. And so we
Mhm.
definitely though focus on tropes. I feel like, especially with TikTok, I know we talked about it,
Mhm.
but they love tropes. They love knowing what tropes they're getting into. There's specific ones they love more than others. So when we are talking about like the books that we have, we definitely focus on tropes. And I also think narrators are huge in
Mhm.
the audiobook industry. People go crazy over their favorite narrators. So we always make sure that we are upfront about the narrators that are going to be in the audiobook, because I think that's huge in encouraging people to pick it up. Blasting on social media. If people see a book over and over and over again, they're going to want to check it out. So we try to get them different graphics to use and making sure it's like physically an audiobook, like visibly they can see that it's an audio. So our graphics will include like headphones and showing them, hey, this book's on audio. It may be out in ebook, but check out the audiobook. So we just try to get a lot of word of mouth, as much as people seeing as possible, and focusing on the narrators and the tropes of the books.
You're making me wonder a little bit more about how you found your audience for what you were doing prior to doing this PR work. I am so, I'm just so curious about how people find content, right? Like
Mhm.
now it's so algorithm led, and I feel like that's shifted a little bit. And you've been around for quite a while, and I think it did work and look a little bit different when you started. Do you have a sense of what drew people to your content? I would imagine that whatever that was is bleeding into this PR work now. Like you said, you got
Mhm.
a sense that people are really interested in tropes. You got the sense that people are really interested in narrators. So when did you find that, and and how did you start to incorporate that into the content you were putting out?
So for YouTube, I noticed my most watched videos were trope videos. I would be
Mm.
brothers best friend romances or age gap romances, and people
Mhm.
really gravitated toward those videos because they know the trope they love and they want all the recommendations for that trope. If they're loving forbidden romances right now, a lot of the darker content is really well. So forbidden age gap, stuff like that.
Mhm.
I will say trends do help. I know when Bridgerton came out, I'm a huge historical romance reader.
Mhm.
I blew up. Like I got a lot more followers during that time. So like
Mhm.
before it was a little slow growth, then it was like tons of new followers because I was making Bridgerton content. I was reacting to the show. I was giving lots of recommendations. I did the series review. So like following what's trending, I made sure to apply that to the videos I was putting out. And YouTube has such a good creator page where they give you so much analytics about your videos and what's doing well, where people are finding your videos from. So I
Mhm.
think it's out of all the platforms has the best analytics that you can look at as a creator. But definitely I saw the videos that were doing the best were what was trending currently, like Bridgerton or the tropes. That's what people were mostly gravitating towards. So very much see that in the marketing of audiobooks too. Like you could even say like if narrators are trending, like who's popular, and that's what a lot of people care about.
Hmm. And Alexandria, I don't know how much you see sort of the back end of things in the way that Jessica's describing. Like with YouTube, it's pretty clear cut. Like here are the analytics. I don't know what that looks like for you, but are you able to speak to any impact, if you've observed it at all, of things like narrator reveals, and in your case, simultaneous releases between audio and print? Do you see an impact in marketing, like marketing in those ways?
I don't have all the access,
Mhm.
unfortunately, to like my sales numbers on a, day by day, week by week basis.
Mhm.
I know that some publishers have an author portal where you can really kind of track, like cause and effect.
Mhm.
Most of my analytics come from what I'm seeing with IG likes and shares
Mhm.
and the reach of my own posts, which I do pay a lot of attention to.
Mhm.
And I pay attention to what my followers and my readers are asking for. And I know a lot of them are wanting those simultaneous releases. They're wanting
Mhm.
to see the audiobooks come out at the same time. And I've been fortunate enough that all of my books have released simultaneously in audio and print and ebook.
Mhm.
And it's definitely been something that I've asked my publisher for. We try to do like audio teasers. They give me a little like graphic. I don't know what the exact like it's not like a clip. It's I guess it's a clip of some sort they give
Mhm.
me and I share that. And that always has, you know, great reach.
Mhm.
I all of my books have been narrated by Lauren Sweet,
Right.
and everyone seems to really love her. Luckily, I love her. I love what she's done with my characters and my writing. So I can just kind of like track on the back end, my own personal end of
Mhm.
it. But I can't speak to what my publisher sees in terms of actual sales.
Sure. And you mentioned you've had the same narrator for each of your books. So, of course, like a narrator reveal probably isn't a huge piece of the puzzle, except for perhaps the first book. But what was your involvement in choosing the narrator? Just working with in a traditional publishing avenue, did you get to have any input in that? If you're able to talk about that.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
did. I was able to listen to 6 samples from different narrators and pick my favorite, rank them 1 to 6, and Lauren Sweet was my favorite, and so we've stuck with her. So I definitely was able to give my input, and Avon definitely took that into consideration.
Hmm. Let's stick on this topic for a little bit. I'm really curious to hear more. Just working with a publisher, in all facets of marketing, not just for audiobooks, but like covers and just the type of content that's being put out into the world in order to get attention, garner attention for your books. What does that look like for you beyond just choosing the narrator?
Yeah, I have several meetings with my publishing team. So it's my agent, my editor, my marketing, consultant, and my publicist. And we meet up on Zoom at, about 6 months and then about a month before release to kind of, pull together and make sure that we all have all of our ducks in a row. I know what they're doing for the book. They know what I'm doing for the book.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, when it comes to the cover, I like to joke that I'm probably notorious at Avon for giving a lot of input. I give them like a 20-page PDF of what I would love to see the cover look like, what the characters look like, the colors. I'm a little picky about it. I follow a ton of illustrators on social media, so I give input on the illustrators I'd like to see and the work that I like, and they take all of that into consideration. And I was especially hands-on with my last release, The Fiancé Farce, and they really delivered on the cover of my dreams. And my next release, Truly Madly Deeply, I've seen the cover for that and it's exactly what I wanted. So yeah, I'm really hands-on, and I think we kind of have a really good dialogue going and a constant open dialogue about what I'm doing, what they're doing, what my, priorities are, what I would love them to kind of bridge the gap between, if they could kind of shuffle funds to something. We kind of talk about that. So yeah, just constant communication.
And when you're when you're writing up these pages of notes, are you thinking about it from a marketing perspective, or is it more like this is an addition? This is the one illustration, right? Like this is the picture I get to put in people's minds about my book. Like what's your approach when it comes to that?
I think about it a lot. I probably focus on it more than I should. There's been, a trend in the last few years to illustrated covers, and I love them personally, but I do also understand that there are some readers who feel like they're a little ambiguous. They don't communicate certain aspects of the book, the heat level, the spice, content, trigger warnings that you would see in, other cover trends, the shirtless hero or the object, the handcuffs on the cover, or like a tie that really speaks to certain content. So I do think about that. I do think about what the cover is communicating in terms of not just the couple, but also the content that you're really going to see in the pages. I've pushed for clinch covers, kind of an homage back to, the romances of, the 80s, 90s. I've pushed for that because I do think that it's important for readers to understand, they're going to judge the book by the cover. They're going to pick it up based on what they're seeing on the cover, and then they're going to flip it over and look at the blurb on the back. So I've definitely pushed for more symbolism in my covers.
Jessica, as a consumer of this content, what do covers mean to you? Do they play a part in you choosing books?
I will buy a book without even reading the back if I like the cover. So I am 100%, I will buy it from the cover. But I am just a romance reader. So I don't care if people know I'm reading a romance. So I love the clinch. So I love, Alexandria, that you love the clinch too, because I appreciate that as a romance reader, because then you see these like object covers and you're like, well, like what is the spice level? What is the content? I've read like a bright, happy, sunshiny cover and it's a really dark book. And I felt like I was misled from what I had picked up. So I think that, and covers are just something you could talk about literally all day and what's trending and what like you should and shouldn't do for covers. But as a reader, it is 100% important in the marketing of it and what your readers expect from what they're picking up.
Have you ever had an experience where like there was a cartoon cover and you were surprised by the content and confused by what was inside? Like it felt like there was a disconnect there?
I typically go into cartoon covers thinking they're going to be very low heat and low spice because they look they remind me of YA covers, and I've seen
Sure.
YA illustrated in the romance section too. So I don't think even booksellers know what's inside these books, and I've seen it vice versa. So a lot of times I will pick them up, and I like knowing going in because I prefer more spice than not. So I like going in knowing if it's going to be fade to black. But like, I do remember there was the one where I was shocked that it was like, it started off with her losing her husband and like going on this very emotional journey. And it was literally like a bright yellow sunshiny color. And I was like, I was not expecting a very emotionally packed romance. So I have been misled. And so that's when also I usually pay attention to like what my friends are reading and reviews to see what people have said about it before I start reading it. Because even from the back, you can't tell, like, especially like heat wise, is this going to have spice? Is it not? They don't put that on the back of the book. So.
Yeah. I imagine in future conversations we'll get into, or something I would like to get into is about sort of not even necessarily content warnings, but how much content is conveyed just in the front matter, back matter of the book, because it is so specific. Every reader seems to be looking for a specific experience, right? And some are really comfortable with this kind and some are comfortable with this kind. And you don't always get all that information. You only have these tiny little details to go off of and hope that they're leading you in the right direction. So I imagine in a future marketing conversation, we'll get into some of that a bit more. Jessica, are you primarily an audio person or are you an eyeball reader, or is it kind of a mix? And then I have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah, it's 50-50. I do both. Yeah.
So as someone who does both, is a simultaneous release something that's important to you? Yeah.
Yeah. If it's not a simultaneous release, I usually won't wait for the audio. I'm too impatient and I will pick up the ebook. So I love it, especially some authors have even started releasing earlier. So it might be like a day or two, but I'm like, I can read it even earlier than release day. Then I will pretty much always buy the Audible copy and download it so I can listen to it before release day. I really appreciate when authors do simultaneous release because I listen to audiobooks a lot quicker. I'm a lot slower of a physical reader. So I can do so much while I listen. I can like walk my dogs, do chores, go running, stuff like that. So if I have the opportunity to listen over reading physically, I'll choose the audio. So I definitely appreciate simultaneous release a lot more.
Yeah, I think that especially with the whisper sync option too, being able to go back and forth is really helpful for a lot of us. This is a question for both of you. And I don't know, I'm curious to see if you have an answer for this, but have you encountered people who are talking about how they consume both formats or not? And are you hearing, like Alexandria, are you hearing from your readers sort of which avenue they're going down to consume your books? And Jessica, the same from your viewers and the folks that engage with your content. Do you have a sense of like, is there a balance happening of like a 50-50 kind of thing with eyeball readers and listeners, or does it look some other percentage?
I can't really speak to the percentages, but I do know that on Instagram, when I've done certain posts, like countdown posts, like 2 weeks until XYZ hits, I normally would say shelves and e-readers because I don't really have like a term for like shelves, e-readers, and whatever you listen on. And I would have so many questions. Is it going to be a simultaneous release? Is it going to be an audiobook if I hadn't mentioned it? So I do get a lot of those questions. And, furthering the conversation about percentages, I do also know you're not really supposed to read your reviews, but I still stumble across them. And I do see a lot of people that say, I started, listening to it and then I, transitioned to the ebook or vice versa. So I do think there's a really healthy mix of formats that readers are, picking up when it comes to my books.
And I've seen a lot of people doing that too, where they switch between the ebook and the audiobook, which is really nice with what Rose, you said about Whisper Sync, because it automatically updates your Kindle from where you are in the audiobook. It gets a little trickier if I have it out from the library and I'm like, wait, what chapter was I on? And then having to go and check my physical copy. But I've definitely seen, at least with the people in the like Instagram and YouTube space, it's a good mix between people who are reading physically and audio. I mean, there are some people who only read audiobooks, so they will literally wait months and months to get a release from an author just so they can listen to it on audio. But most people that I know do both. So they'll read a release if it's only out in ebook and paperback physically. But a lot of people will be reading the audiobook if it's simultaneous, and they'll reach for the audio first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm definitely someone who appreciates the being able to follow along on both platforms, and have also encountered that if it's from the library, it's just like, it's much harder to keep track of where you are. I suppose this is perhaps more of a question for Alexandria, but Jessica, feel free to chime in if you have some thoughts as well. I'm curious about specific audiences. We talked a little bit about tropes and audio and like interest in specific narrators and things like that. And so I'm wondering if within that, if you're ever thinking about sort of subgroups of readers, that this element of my story might be most interesting to this group versus this element that might be more interesting to this group. And are you thinking about that in terms of the marketing that you're doing, or in the conversations you're having with your publisher, Alexandria? Is that something that ever comes up?
Honestly, I kind of do the spaghetti method. I kind of throw it all at the wall and see what sticks when it comes to marketing. I definitely focus heavily on tropes. Even though I'm not on TikTok, I still think that tropes, are a great shorthand on whatever platform you're most active. Tropes are kind of, they're catnip for readers. Readers who gravitate to enemies to lovers, that's going to be something that they'll pick up a book just because it has that. Marriage of convenience, they'll pick it up. I do think that in terms of specific spaces like queer spaces, readers will pick something up regardless of the trope because they're hungry for it, especially in the trad space where things are picking up but still lagging, especially like in sapphic spaces. But I definitely put an emphasis on all tropes because I just think that me as a reader, I will pick something up because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm wondering, you were talking about, obviously your stories have, I imagine, a pretty robust queer following. And I'm curious about sort of what I call the windows and mirrors approach. If you're writing a story, it can be a mirror for some folks, so they're getting to see reflection of a piece of themselves in what they're consuming. Or it's a window into somebody else's world. Just thinking about, it sounds like you're mostly just putting it all out there, but is that ever a part of your outreach, your marketing strategy, or any element of the work that you're doing? Are you thinking about targeting this audience for whom perhaps this is more of a window, and this audience for whom this might be more of a mirror?
I think when it comes to windows for, with my queer books, all my books are queer, but if I'm, looking to market to a wider audience, I do focus on tropes when it comes to marketing to try and grab in a wider audience. So maybe you don't gravitate to sapphic romances, but you do gravitate to marriage of convenience. So you'll pick up a sapphic marriage of convenience if I focus on that trope element. I might get more specific into certain like shorthand, certain things that are more meme based within the community, a queer community, for those readers to market to them, kind of like a wink and a nod, kind of, that I won't, go into great detail to explain to people who don't understand, who don't have that lived experience. But I do try to kind of cast a wide net with the overarching trope.
And Jessica, is any of this something that you want to speak to at all? I don't know if this really, I suppose, especially from the PR work you're doing, perhaps this comes up. In particular, that question of windows versus mirrors. Is that something that you are working with your authors on at all? Whether it's, a specific, whether it's a story written by a queer author, or with the intention of like or telling a queer story, or an author of color or something like that, where there might be a specific community that they're writing for. Does that play into any of the choices that you all are making in the work that you're doing?
Well, we do pretty similar to what Alexandria does, where we do focus on the tropes underneath the queer title. So we did do a sapphic romance, but it was travel. It was where they fell for each other and they weren't really similar to one another. So it's kind of like an opposites attract kind of thing. And so we really focused on those. And a lot of what we do is very visual because we have a lot of posting on social media. And that's what we focus on with our graphics. So we will incorporate different graphics that show the tropes that you have. So like if it's the travel, we'll do like kind of map tropes. So they don't even have to read the text to see. It's kind of like with covers. You look at it and you're like, oh, I know I'm going to get a travel romance. And there's Eiffel Tower in the background. So I know they're going to be going to France. And so we typically do focus on those kind of tropes to kind of entice readers, especially if they're not typically like gravitated towards the queer romance or they aren't already a queer reader. Like, look, this does, like what Alexandria said, they loved Marriage of Convenience. Like, this is what you would love too. So go read this book. So that's what we focus on as well.
Yeah, it's June and it is Pride Month and it's audiobook month, which is, I'm very happy for those worlds colliding. And we're seeing obviously a lot of queer romance being lifted up right now, but also I think I've seen a lot more of it coming up even outside of this month, just more buzz about queer stories, which is very exciting to me personally. And I'm curious, Alexandria, for you, I mean, you're writing Own Voices stories, so perhaps these were always the stories you wanted to tell, but are you impacted at all by, or was your choice to write the stories that you do write impacted at all by sort of that rise in interest in seeing sapphic stories, or were you writing them in hopes to help build that interest? I guess I'm asking about sort of a chicken versus egg situation here.
It kind of is a chicken versus egg situation. I always wanted to write the stories, but I also always wanted to make money writing, to be perfectly frank. And so it was kind of like a perfect collision of timing and circumstances that I think I kind of came into the industry at the right time where they were opening up, doors were opening and they were open to those stories. Those stories have always been around. People have been writing them for long before I've been published, but I do think there's been a boom. And I really was very lucky that I got my foot in the door at the right time.
Yeah, it does sound like a timing thing, right? Like you just came about at perhaps the perfect moment when people are much more open to, I guess, to that window approach to reading, right? And I think that, queer folks have always been seeking out these stories, but perhaps they're harder to find. And we find ourselves in this moment where both there's a rise in interest from all people and more opportunities for writers to step in and actually tell the stories they've been itching to tell. So yeah, it does sound like perhaps you just really hit at the right moment, which is wonderful.
Definitely, yeah. And I think that that's something that the indie space was doing for many years. And because the indie space was so successful and thriving, I think trad publishers kind of, sat up and started to pay attention that they go where the money is.
Yeah. I guess this is a good time to talk about this question of going viral as we're talking about trends and rise in interest in particular topics. Is there ever a pressure to kind of get your name, your work, your YouTube content, whatever it is, specifically to go viral? Do you ever find that you're creating content with that in mind? Or is it more I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, and then sometimes it just hits because of whatever reason?
I think it's very hard to go viral, and a lot of it's luck. You just like throw whatever to the board and see if something catches and that goes viral. And I've also noticed, at least with like books and authors, it's typically something the reader has created that helped the author go viral. I don't really see the author themselves posting something to go viral. They have, but I feel like it's just something sticks with whatever that person created, and the algorithm liked it, whatever the algorithm is that none of us know, and that makes it go viral. So I feel like if I focus on trying to go viral, I would get extremely frustrated because I've never gone viral. And that would be frustrating with like 10 plus years that I've been in the community. Like that cannot be your driving force with social media. I feel like you can't try to focus on going viral because it's hard to do and you can't control it. It's just random.
Yeah, I agree. Going viral is never my goal. I don't know how I would go viral. I've had some things hit, but I don't even think I'd call them viral. I think I would become extremely frustrated and it would probably actually stifle my creativity and my posting on social media because I would feel so, downtrodden about it. I think my primary goal is always creating content that my readers are going to like. And if my readers like it and my followers like it, hopefully more readers and more followers will like it. So it's always a combination of specificity for my readers. And then hopefully that will, also reach a broad audience. It's kind of kismet, but yeah, it's never my goal to go viral.
Yeah. I think we're in this weird space right now because there are plenty of people out there who I think do have that goal in mind, right? And they who knows what they're looking to gain from that. Perhaps, obviously, the more eyeballs you have on your content, the more opportunity there is for that to bring in an income for you, perhaps. But I can say, I think just as both of you have identified, for me as well, I don't really see the point in any social media if it's not going to be meaningful to me. Like if it's just like a followers grab, it just feels like a waste of time for me, especially because any content that I'm putting out there is about the work that I'm doing, the stuff that I'm interested in, and as opposed to like some content that exists that's just like content for the sake of making content, I suppose that can garner a lot of attention sometimes. So I guess I'm right there with the both of you that it's really hard to do, and also just, I don't know, feels not very fun to try to do that. But thinking about that, with that in mind, of kind of just getting the word out about, for Alexandria, for you, for your books, Jessica, for you, perhaps for your PR firm, or for on behalf of the authors that you work with. Can you talk a little bit about the role that advanced listeners, advanced readers play in helping spread the word? What expectations there are around those groups if you have folks that you are gifting, your content, your books to ahead of time. Just a little bit of what that looks like and how it plays into your marketing strategy.
Yeah, I'm not personally in control of ARC distribution. I can definitely give certain names and contact information to my publisher, my publicist, people who have read my books in the past and loved them, who have done a really great job of grassroots marketing, which is really what I feel like the purpose of, advanced reader copies or advanced listener copies. I feel like that's the whole point. Getting it into the hands of the readers who will read it and hopefully enjoy it and talk about it. And they are going to be the ones that get the word out there. It's kind of like how I would never strive to go viral. And when people do go viral, it normally is, like Jessica said, because of, reader-based content, not author-based content. I can only hope that maybe, lightning will strike and maybe somebody who reads it and loves it will post something and it will, cause somebody to pre-order a copy, and maybe it'll go viral. But that's still not the goal. It's just about getting the word out there, the buzz out there to as many people.
And I think it's important to find readers who you think will genuinely like the book, like reach an authentic audience, because a lot of times people get excited like, oh, this person with 20,000 followers really liked my book or picked it up. But like, what about this person who might have 100, but they have 100 really loyal readers who like what they're recommending. So with our queer book that we had, I spent a lot of time looking up queer Instagram content creators who read romance, who would really like the book that we had. And I would reach out to them and said, hey, I have this book. I explained it. I would love if you were part of the tour and would get an advanced listener's copy, which was a little bit hard because they had to be a queer reader who also listened to audio. And it's hard to see who listens to audiobooks unless they're actively posting about it. But I definitely think it's really important because we vet every one of our reviewers. We have them fill out a form and we personally check each and every one and look at their content to see if they're a good fit for the book. Because you want people who would enjoy the book to pick it up and not someone who doesn't even read romance to sign up for your age gap romance. They've never read one in their lives. Maybe they would like it, but that's not really the audience you're going for. So audience is really important to consider when sending out your arcs.
Yeah, I love that you did that research. I guess that's sort of the crux of all the questions that I'm asking is I just, as someone who builds a lot of networks and spends a lot of time sort of one-to-one with folks, not just in the audiobook world, but in the other arts work that I've done over the course of my career, I know that I have always valued those like, the relationship building moments versus just like a big audience in the way that you described what you said about someone who only has 100 followers, but those followers are really engaged versus someone who has 5,000 followers who are just kind of, not really engaging with the content and not really caring so much about just what's happening in that person's content or in what they're making. That feels really significant, right? Because if you have a really engaged reader and they really love your work and this book is just right for them, then it seems like they'd be much more likely to go out and actually talk about the book to other people. So I love hearing that that's something that you're doing. It makes a lot of sense to me. Let's talk a little bit, going back to audio specifically. We've talked a little bit about how narrator reveals are important and seem to garner a lot of interest in the same way that talking about tropes do. I'm curious to hear more about the role that narrators, I guess this is also a question for you, Jessica, probably more specifically, but Alexandria, feel free to chime in as well. The role that narrators play in marketing. Are you partnering with narrators at all in the audiobooks that you're helping to market? Alexandria, have you had any interaction with your narrator? Do you know if they're also sharing information about the book? What does that look like for you all?
We haven't actually personally paired up with any narrators before. I do know that sometimes authors will host different live streams with them to celebrate the release. I've seen that happening, which is really great. And we'd love to do that. But what we have done on our social media platforms is we'll just tag the narrator. I mean, especially it is giving them credit. You tag the author, but if we do a reel with an audio clip, we make sure to tag the narrators as well. And narrators build up their own platforms too. So they are their own social media platform. And so we get excited when the narrators also share the things that we're doing, because then that's their audience who are already fans, and then they can check out more that they would enjoy, what we are promoting. But we've never officially partnered with narrators. But I definitely think there's space for that, especially with the authors and live streams or reveals posting to their platforms too, so that they can have their audience as well. But I do think that narrators are really, really important and should give credit. I love it when narrators are on the audio graphic, the cover, I guess, for the audio. I really appreciate it when the narrators are on there too, because they're a big part of the book and the performance as well. So
yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I try to shout out Lauren whenever I can, because I feel like I do have a bit of a problem listening to my own audiobooks, just because there's a certain hearing my own words. But what I've heard, she elevates my writing. She has done such a great job of portraying my characters that I want her to get her credit. She's a creator on the audiobooks wholeheartedly. Most of my interaction with Lauren has been on social media. I haven't done any kind of official event, but I always love seeing, we follow each other. And so, Audible or other platforms will do, other platforms will have best books of the month. Other audio platforms will do that. And so if I don't see it, she'll see it. They'll tag her, she'll tag me. So it feels like a real partnership. And I like seeing that, and just kind of seeing how we work together on that.
And do you feel like we've talked about how narrator reveals are important, but how important is the name recognition? Having a big, someone who has, I don't know, who's considered famous in the romance world versus someone who's newer, but has garnered a lot of positive feedback on their work. have you seen that has an impact or not?
I can speak to myself as a reader that when I first was, auditioning narrators, I was familiar with Lauren's work because she narrated some of Christina Lauren's earlier work, and I was a huge fan of Christina Lauren, still am. And so that was immediate name recognition, that connection of Lauren Sweet narrated Christina Lauren. That was just on a personal level.
And I can speak for like our signups for audiobooks. If it's a really well-known author or a well-known narrator or even both, we see a lot more signups and interest from people on well-known narrators. So I do think that definitely impacts just the notice that people take on your audio, especially because I think people are very particular about their narrator. So if they find one they really love and resonate with, they'll want to read more from that person.
Sure. Is there anything you'd like to see evolve in the narrator audiobook marketing relationship? Anything that you feel is missing? Alexandria, from your experience with your books so far, is there something you wish that you'd like to have happen in the future?
I would just really like to see more recognition for audiobook narrators. I haven't always seen it like listed on graphics. When I do see it, I always appreciate it. It's something that I try to stress, but I, sometimes have to dig for, figuring out who narrated an audiobook, even from a big 5 publisher. So I would like to see more recognition because they really are a creator on it. They can be really integral to sales.
Sure.
Yeah.
I agree. What about you, Jessica?
So I recently did some narrator interviews on my YouTube channel, and they were so fascinating to me. And I feel like unless you follow them on Instagram, you don't get to see a lot about the person narrating the book. They're just the voice, and you just hear their performance. So I would really love to see the narrators take more of a hands-on role. I mean, I know narrators are busy and they're narrating all the time, and I don't know how much time they have left to helping market, but I think it'd be really cool to have them become their own, not personality, but they are a person too, and have them part of it. So part of the live shows that authors do, if they do an Instagram live, like invite the narrator and have that kind of discussion, because narrating is an art and it does add another level to the book, like what Alexandria said. And I think that digging into their craft is so interesting to me. And I think that would be really cool seeing that grow even more on social media platforms.
Yeah. And I mean, if people are I hear from folks all the time that they're drawn to particular books because of the narrator that they know or a voice that they love. So it stands to reason that if narrators get pulled into that direct marketing or that direct, conversations that are happening, live conversations that are happening, that would likely garner a lot more interest, one would think, right? I agree with everything both of you have said. I would love to see all of that as well, just as a narrator myself. Are there industries unrelated to audiobooks that you're learning from in creating your own marketing? Alexandria, for your own books, Jessica, for all the content that you make? Or is it really just like looking within the industry for ideas and inspiration?
I only really consume in the industry. So that's really what I focus on, and seeing what works for people and what the audience really wants.
I guess my Instagram following who I follow is very wide ranged. I follow a lot of different creators, bloggers, beauty bloggers and other content creators. And I don't know if I necessarily study it in the sense that I'm like really genuinely trying to figure out what's working for them, but I think I probably absorb some of it. I think about what I'm drawn to as a, consumer, and I think it probably does influence what I put out there. But I am primarily focused on what's working within the publishing sphere.
And what about, is that romance specifically for you or publishing in general?
It's primarily romance-based because I am primarily a romance reader at my core, but I do follow other authors. I follow a lot of YA authors because I do feel like they have, they're tapped into kind of the Gen Z space. And I think, Gen Z is coming up and they're going to become hopefully romance readers, part of maybe my readership one day. So I do like to see what they're doing and what, is attracting their readers. So I do look at that too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of authors that I've worked with seem to also write in YA or came up through that space as well. And I guess because so much YA is romantic, right? Like I suppose it'd be like Fade to Black or not even getting to that point. But there's so much connective tissue, I think, between a lot of YA and romance. So that makes a lot of sense to me. So we're gonna start to wrap up, but one last question for both of you is there anything, or what is one thing you wish every publisher, either indie publishers or traditional publishing, did with marketing for the books that they publish? One change they could make or addition?
I think what Jessica said about, the specificity of zeroing in on ARC readers, I think that publishers would really benefit from, not just looking at audience size, the follower size of, their advanced readers, but looking at, who they really are and who they speak to as their own audience. It's something that I do try to focus on when I kind of funnel specific ARC readers to my publisher, but I think that publishers would definitely be better suited if they paid more attention to the specificities of those readers.
And I just hope more so with the indie world that authors continue to put an importance on audiobooks. I know it's very expensive, especially if they decide to self-publish their audiobooks and independently publish those as well, but not just have the files and say, here's a graphic, it's live, but really put a lot of just focus and attention into promoting their audiobook and getting those made, because you're missing out on so many readers if you don't have any audiobooks for your books. So exploring different avenues of how you could get your audiobooks out there and actually reaching out to audiobook listeners to reach a whole new audience you may not have had before, and just really focusing on the marketing of your audio, which I feel like is a huge thing missing in the romance industry. It's progressing, like audiobooks are blowing up, and I think authors are seeing how it's important, but just continuing to see the importance of that.
Totally. And I'll add for myself, I would love to see more tagging of narrators on social media specifically, because we will share it. Most of us will, but we don't know that it's there if you're not telling us. All of the above. Agree with everything you both said. Thank you so much for this really interesting conversation and dip into marketing for audiobooks. I'm going to invite Samantha to come back on and join us to wrap us up. But I still have so many questions, so perhaps we can return.
Thank you so much for joining us for the third Rosemoor Roundtable. You can follow all of today's guests on social media or find them on their websites, which we've linked in the details. To keep up with what's next on the Rosemoor Roundtable, you can subscribe to this podcast on the app you're listening to now, or follow myself, Samantha Brentmore, at Ms_Brentmore, or Rose Dioro at Rose Dioro VO on your social media platform of choice, where we will both enthusiastically be promoting the next discussion. Thank you to Brickshop Audio, our producer and distributor for the podcast, and thank you for listening. See you next time.